Would you like to review the book? That was really nice, thank you. It was very careful, and I can tell that you really took time with the poems. That's wonderful. I'm glad I got it to you on time.
That's so funny.
How long do I have to read? I wasn't sure.
20, 30, whatever fits you.
Okay. Thank you for having me, Tree Reading Series. It's weird to be back in Ottawa. I used to live here for a really short period of time when I was 20, after I graduated from Mount Allison. Oh, I should just say, Elizabeth Venart is my mom. I'm Sarah Ellen. Elizabeth
Sarah
Venart.
Ellen?
Sarah Ellen,
oh,
yeah.
sorry.
But my mom is Elizabeth Venart, and she was also a poet, so that's probably where you saw the Elizabeth. But yeah, I used to live on Bank Street at 589 and a half Bank Street for, I don't know, Lori, how long was it? Like 6 months or something? Not very long. And I lived over in a cult shop. I don't know if you if you know the occult shop that used to be there. I used to be terrified at night that somehow bad spirits were going to come up through the floor to me. Anyways, it's always good to be back here. Well, I guess I'll start by talking a little bit about woodshedding and where I wrote it. I wrote it at writing retreats all over the place, in Scotland, in New York City, on a great little house. I had a house sit on the Bay of Fundy in New Brunswick, where I stayed for a year and a half looking after this dog, Sally. And yeah, I got the house for free, and it was right on the beach. It was lovely. And so these poems were written in all these places where I was alone, and probably the one in Pokalogan, New Brunswick, was the place where I was most alone. I had a bicycle, and that's it, and in the middle of the winter, I couldn't bike, obviously, but my sister would come once a week and take me to buy groceries, and all I did was write, and it was the most incredible year and a half of my life, up until having babies, of course. And I still think back on it fondly. But I wrote the collection in all these different places, and so I'll talk a little bit about each place as I read. One of the first places that I went was an island north of Minnesota, kind of between Minnesota and Canada, and it's called Oberholzer Island, and the quote from the front of the book is by Oberholzer, and it's, "I want to see everything, I don't care how hard it is," which I think really suits me as a poet, because I really enjoy examining even the most difficult things in detail. So while we were on this island, there were 8 women on this island, and we were there for 2 weeks, and the island was probably about the size of this room. So it was this tiny little island, and Oberholzer, who's long since deceased, had built these tiny little houses, writing houses on the island. And when I say tiny, I mean tiny, just big enough space for a bed and a desk and a view. And some of them were in trees. They were called bird houses, and they were up in the tree. There was a Japanese house, which was on a pagoda out into the lake. You had to walk on this long, contemplative kind of wooden catwalk, I guess, out to the pagoda house. But there were also 2 houseboats kind of hanging off the sides of the island, and they were old prostitute boats. And I was in one of the prostitute boats. And the prostitute, we didn't call it a prostitute boat, we called it a whore boat. But anyways, the whore boat that I was in had a player piano in it, and it was really quite something. So I'm going to start with that poem if I can find it. It's called Chimi Frena. And Chimi Frena was an opera that was on one of these wind-up Victrola gramophones that was also in the honky-tonk whore boat that I was staying in. I guess the only other thing you might need to know is that the syrinx is part, probably some of you know this already, but the syrinx is the part of the bird where sound comes from, or where the song comes from. The island is our own, an inconvenient province we visit each summer as if visiting ensures it truly exists. The pontoon shrugs us off at dockside, recedes up the lake. Everything is as we left it. In the houseboat, records wait upon the shelf, the old Victrola winding up, Lucia's Chini Frena scratching at the speaker. Light chooses moments, filters through the spines of evergreens, refracts off tight pine cones on the path. And when we float inside the lake's wide lid, water presses at our sides. It holds us like a luge. Above, in the blue corridor of sky, evening is falling. Fledgling sparrows try their song, half finish, clear the syrinx, start again. This fissure in what sounds familiar hurts somewhere. A knob switches on and off between our throat and heart. Also on this island, we drove each other crazy because we were 8 women alone on an island for 2 weeks. So we spent a lot of time in the water, just kind of getting away from each other. So Wake is a poem that I wrote about hanging out in the water. Wake. There are sudden canopies of silence between the low tones of speedboats, between the water skiers' whoops and peals, their white arcs on the waves. We bob there, treading water, waiting for the wake to roll us back to shore. You remember waiting like this, don't you? When it comes, the surprise is that it's in you, lifting. When you are alone all day in a house, I should say that I grew up in a family with 8 other people, so I was never really alone in a house before until I spent this time in this big house in Pokalogan, New Brunswick, and because it was so close to the water and there was nothing really around it, I was aware of seasonal change, which I know sounds retarded, that it wasn't until I was 30 that I noticed this, but really aware of it, aware of the light and how it moved around the house and things like that. And at moments, I was not only lonely, I was also having difficulty writing. So I started writing about not being able to write or being distracted from writing, and Distraction was a poem that came out of that. Astounding how the walls correct themselves, become tomorrow, how light upon the stairs is mutiny, cast yellow in its method towards dusk, and on the lips of coffee cups the day occurs, even if I part with conversation, shopping, and the like. It whisks along, my difficulties snubbing words, not enough of what is clear, staying that way. Devotion to the desk and chair elude me. Words climb from the dictionary and disappear, like my own blown over tracks on stairwell and carpet. And in the hem of windows, my reckoning, air curved full of motes. What is missing, plentiful. If only torpidity were easy. Another plot conceived in scot-free leisure. Dawn, say. Instead, the heat-haze strut of compulsion. Instead, the wearing down of want. Okay, I've never read this next one aloud, but Sabine wanted to, I've read it aloud as I was writing it, but never in front of an audience, but Sabine asked me to read a poem, and now I've just lost it. So I'm going to try it. I hope I don't screw it up. Double wide. I'm cat-sitting this afternoon, reading Sex and the Single Girl in a sun-heated armchair while Marlin purrs, schmoozes about my ankles. He's not lovely, basically your average footstool with a shitty ass, equivalent in cat weight to the man who, when he died, had to be crane-lowered by piano box to the street below. In other words, this cat is large. So when an orange cat, dwarf in comparison, appears at the window, it's a surprise to all concerned that Marlin traverses several rooms. See, I knew I would screw up. Marlin traverses several rooms, heaves himself midair to body check the glass. I think the building shifts a little to the left. On her side of the glass, the dwarf falls off the world. Marlin swaggers to his food dish, lies down to eat his dinner. Splayed on the linoleum, he looks like the photo of the largest man on earth, the one taken in a double-wide, face down in Arkansas, the body like two continents spreading side by side. What struck me most, and Marlin would agree with me on this, how human, ineffectual, the tea towel someone laid for modesty across his great divide. Do you guys know that photo? I remember seeing it in National Geographic or something when I was about 8 and just thinking he was incredible, just this man. Anyways, he's very large. Marlin was large too, yeah. Let's see here. I always pick too many poems and then I kind of waver between them when I get up here. Okay, I think I'm going to read a few family poems for my mom. Yeah, like I said, we grew up in a family of 7 kids, and obviously 2 parents. And so a whole section of this book is informed by that childhood. Am I speaking clearly into the microphone? Is it okay? Okay. So I'll start with power lines. Traveling by station wagon, 5 children in the back, the newest baby held on someone's knee. The car gained momentum, sped down hills. Over one tanned sister's shoulder, I saw vivid fields locked behind white lengths of birch. Wires loped between attendant poles. Strapped into our seats, we had in common things we couldn't get at. Up on the wires, small birds alighted, fluttered off, as if together they'd all heard the same charged message. And this is a poem called Canary. February being what it is, you bring an old pair of binoculars to the window, inspect the expected paths of birds returning home. Between unlikely sightings, you like to be close to the stove. In a butter-colored jacket, you sing to anything on radio, punch down rising loaves of bread while stirring golden fruit peels into a brandied jelly. When you fly from the warmest room, we look everywhere for you. In the attic of our house, we catch you, swinging old valises down the hatch. We look up and you face us, like an animal that's trained to speak but doesn't really like to. This is a poem called Advantage House. After this fight, our mother's victory is to be alone behind the laundry door, folding pastel baby sheets, sorting mismatched socks, darning in frenzy. Our father, restless with defeat, applies himself to housework. He tugs light switches on and off in closets, knocks on our hollow walls. In the sunlit pathway of our room, he carries an undulating pile of poster boards, kinds of horses, solar system, how volcanoes actually erupt, and throws them in the trash. Pausing to fix his disheveled hair, he asks us for help up in the attic, placing tin plates of mouse poison on the beams. After, he lifts us each up to the sink. While he rubs our fingernails with soap, we see he's weeping. Not so much curious as wonder-filled, we follow him down to the basement. In the sauna, he's begun to build, but hasn't finished yet. We watch him pouring make-believe cold water over make-believe hot stones. We were talking a little bit while I was eating my delicious borscht about how poems start, and I was talking about how often with me it's a line that I'll get, and then I'll just play with that line over and over again. I was dog sitting in New York. One of the places that I was woodshedding was this great place in Dumbo, which is down under the Manhattan Bridge overpass in well, I guess it's just off the island of Manhattan. And so I used to run a lot then before I had babies. I used to be a runner. And when I was running, I would run over to Battery Park, and it was the year after September 11th that I did this. And the skyline just looked so shockingly different. And there was kind of a somberness to the city that summer. I don't know if I imagined it because, I mean, obviously everyone was talking about what had happened, but it was, yeah, so I got this line anyways. I was talking to a friend, and they were talking about how the black squirrels in New York were brought, I mean, they were bullshitting me, I should just make that clear, but they told me that the black squirrels in New York were brought over as a gift from Tsar Nicholas, and brought to the city. And of course, I'm very gullible, and I believed them, and I started thinking about this idea of this gift from this Tsar who was later murdered. And anyway, so I put it in my poem, and he showed up at my reading. I read at the Manx Pub, is that what it's called? Yeah. And, okay, you probably all know this poet who works as a waiter at the Manx Pub, okay, but anyways, yes. So he told me this story, and yeah, so I was reading this poet and telling this beautiful poetic idea of these squirrels being a gift, and he started laughing really hard. I was duped yet again. Anyway, so this is for David. Battery Park. At dawn, the gray line of water breaks against the statue in the bay, her greenback greener with decay. Smudged-looking wrens hop sideways, wings like long cuffs drag along the path. Black squirrels, dark gifts to the city from the last Russian Tsar, carry on crack-addled searches for their mislaid stash. The yellow lawn is mowed down to an inch. Saplings, small against the buildings, are older than disaster. I think wild limbs cope by being incomplete. Lime-colored questions budding from bark-colored sleeves. I'd like to read this poem for my mom. It's called Edison. Without you, I didn't want light, its choosy reflections, on these jars of flowers, on nursing bottles, on plates holding blue cheese going green. It was worse in the garden, the edges of beans so keenly sealed and alive. In darkness, I waited for the kitchen, not wanting hunger, but faced all the same with its pain. I took inside myself half of everything left, half a pear, half an orange. One fig gone gray, forethought made me leave whole. I wanted what you touched to be hallowed. It was hope with a twist. I wanted you not gone. I imagined you netted, pulled back from ether, or domed in still life, caught in the gridwork of clouds.
Poems Einstein.
Yeah. Postcard to you. Since I came back, my days so thin, barely there. I should tell you before I start this poem that Peaches, some of you may not know, but Peaches is a singer who sings these horribly revolting punk rock songs. And I liked her for a little while, and then I got beyond her. But anyways, you might not know that, so I should say that. I'll start again. Postcard to you. Since I came back, my days so thin, barely there. Peaches, the burlesque queen of techno-punks in town. Tonight, I could go see her, but the urge is just the tip of all that's wrong with me. Instead, I go running downtown. Empty at night, the alleys hold the first warmth of the season in their mouths. As I run, buildings turn right-angled, lit to make me small, soft, and illegal, and each poem in my head becomes something you'd love. One of the places, as I said, one of the places that I went was Hawthornden Castle in Scotland, and it was amazing. It was just wonderful to be taken care of like that. They would bring a little wicker basket to your room every day at lunchtime with whatever you'd ordered for lunch in it, and they wouldn't disturb you. They just place it outside your door. So you had this little like picnic every day. It was amazing. And plus you were in a castle, so that was pretty cool. Anyways, every single day I would go out and walk around the moat, and and there were these horses up on a hill, and so I kind of made friends with the horses. And this is a poem that I wrote for those horses called Carve Out What You Love. Diagonal rain, cold on flat fields, a beaten scent of apples, graceless on the ground. Racehorses wear coats today, green padded coats, one in his so comfortable he's even lying down. Already imperfect, you lean against the fence post, feel the channels of old acronyms you've carved and left before. How perfectly they hold your finger or your thumb. You wish just once inside yourself you could fit like that. And I think I'll finish with Available Light, which is kind of suitable because it's the last poem that I wrote in this collection, and I wrote it after I returned to Montreal and moved into the house that I live in now. So it's kind of the end of woodshedding, this poem. It's called Available Light. Before I turn into a spinster, I want you to know I'm sitting here where marvels still arise. You've been right about a few things. The cardinal, bred for silence and the cold, did leave. He took his Arctic path, and I did feel empty as a window, holding one view. But another view has come to light, and alive things are alighting here from the rafters of the railroad bridge. Silken crows, another and another, float past the silver stems of street lamps. So I'm busy these days, counting their flint wings and their navy black corseted backs as they drift into the white-capped harbor of my yard. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Do you usually have questions afterwards?
No, we don't, but why not?
I love answering questions if anyone has. Yeah.
So does the actual woodshed phrase show up in a poem?
Yes, it does. I didn't read that poem. I don't usually read it because it.
You don't
I don't
want
know
to
how
give
you
it away.
guys
I
feel.
gotta buy the book. I'll buy the book.
Yeah, but the thing is that it's a found poem. When I first came up with the terms, I was talking to a jazz singer at another writing retreat that I went at. There was this jazz ensemble, and he said, oh, we go down south and we woodshed. And I said, what is that? That's such a great term. And he said, oh, it's an old jazz and blues term for going away and perfecting your craft until you're good enough to be in the public with it, which questionably I am, right? But I just like the idea of going away and working on something in solitude. And I've never minded being alone. I've always enjoyed it. So I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to spend the next year and a half doing this. So that's where it all started.
Okay.
And so I did a Google search, of course, of the term woodshedding, and I got all these different interpretations of it. And so I wrote a short poem. Well, I didn't write it. I should correct that. I put together a found version of what woodshedding is, and I included that in the book. Yeah.
Good.
But it's not mine, so I don't feel like I should read it, But buy the book and you'll see it.
Thanks.
But yeah.
So are you glad that you went through this experience?
Yeah, I would do it again in a heartbeat. I really loved it. But it was tough at times. I mean, I had a sister close by, so it wasn't like I was completely alone, but I had no social network. I basically left grad school and did this exercise for a year and a half.
Have you had that type of experience before? And what I mean by that is, I am a musician, so I know the term.
Yeah.
So if I heard the word, I would know, right?
Yeah.
But for you, it was kind of this little personal epiphany that then triggered you to go off on a little poetic, not little, excuse me, but a poetic adventure,
Well, it was
right?
little. It was,
Well, no,
yeah.
but I mean,
Yeah.
so an actual epiphany. So do you have a sense of something burgeoning within you when you're at a different point in your life now?
Well, I can't go, I look at that period and I think, wow, I can't go away for that long. My children would be traumatized completely. But
You can do a little legit.
yeah, the 9-month-old, maybe a bit.
Okay.
But yeah, I realize now, like, probably the length of time I'll be able to go away for the next little while is maybe like a week or 2 weeks in another 6 months or something. But even that, my parents traveled together a few times when I was younger, and I remember how long 2 weeks seemed. So even that, I think, it's going to be hard to do that because I always think back on. But I forget what your question was.
Well, the woodshedding concept was in effect the doorway to you going off and doing something.
Yeah.
So I wasn't suggesting you would shed again, although go ahead if you want to.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you have some sense of some other word or term or phrase
For what I'm doing
affecting you in the
next.
same
Oh.
way. So the burgeoning idea was kind of wondering if you have a sense of intuition around that.
Yeah, no, it'll probably be motherhood, but
You're already there.
yeah. I don't know what I'm going to do next. Yeah, I don't really know. I've got, as I was saying at dinner earlier, I've got 2 big journals full of one-liners, basically. So they're not poems at all, and I don't know what I'm going to do with that.
Stand-up comedy?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Rob can't extend himself
Yeah.
any further.
Yes, sir, in the back row, yes.
If you move your way into garaging, it will at least be attached to the house.
Well, I've got, what are those little sheds that you buy at Home Depot?
Yeah.
When my husband and I got married, he winterized one of these sheds and put out a telephone line for me, which was the best
Oh my
wedding
God.
gift I could have gotten. So I've got a little Home Depot woodshed in my backyard.
With a window, I hope.
It's got tiny little, the little rectangular shaped plastic kind of windows in it. But it's got a bit of a view.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Kind of a view of the back of the house.
I need one of those.
That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Can you talk about the process of putting the collection together? Having a bunch of individual poems. And it's a very different process to figure out how to order them, and it's always different. You do it one way or the other way. So just wondered if you could talk about that.
Yeah, I had great help, which
Yeah.
was really important to kind of frame it all. Barry Dempster, who's you probably all know, he's the editor at Brick, and he really helped me. I envisioned it chronological, so kind of dealing with childhood first, and he suggested it a different way, well, the way it is. And I think it's better the way it is. I think if it had been chronological, it would have been kind of boring. But I mean, I never really thought of it because I don't know about you guys, but I never read a book from front cover to back, ever. So, I mean, in terms of poetry, of course with novels I do. But with poetry, I never do it. I kind of just pick and choose and play that game where you flip the pages and see where it falls open. So I hadn't really thought about how to set it up. But I had the 3 main sections decided, like how the poems were going to be in each section. I could handle that much, but the idea of doing the whole collection was kind of, I didn't know how to put those 3, well, how I was going to do it would have been very boring, but Barry had changed it around.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How did he do that? Was it a theme or?
Well, I mean, there's 3 sections, so he just said, I think that if you do it chronologically, it'll just be kind of boring.
Right.
I think it's better if you put the woodshedding section first, and then it shows that I think now that I know it, you know, now that I understand what he was saying, I think what he was trying to show was a kind of growth, like this is where I was, this is what I'm looking back on. This middle section is kind of like, this is where I came from, and this is where I am now is where it ends. The more, the Montreal poems at the end.
So you had submitted it one way, but he suggested different.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.